All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another video, and I'm super excited today because I'm joined by the one and only Graham Cochrane. Thank you so much for being here, man. I really appreciate it. So for those of you who don't know, Graham is a renowned mixing engineer and also a business coach, and he basically owns these two businesses that he runs on a daily basis. And yeah, I just wanted to bring him on today because he has basically impacted a lot of what I do and how I view mixing and business as well. So just kind of wanted to get his thoughts on the general situation going on today and maybe how it could help us as a community, step out of this in a positive way. So thank you again, Graham. If you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about yourself and kind of maybe how you got started with the recording revolution, and then kind of what gave you the push to start this second online business channel as well.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Chris. I got into recording revolution by way of just love for music. I mean, I'm a musician first, was always singing, was always involved in a concert band as a trumpet player. And then I picked up guitar because I wanted to write songs and be in a rock and roll band. And I did musical theater. I mean, anything related to music or performance, just loved it. And in high school, stumbled into recording because our band wanted to make a record and we didn't want to go to the studio. And we had a fixed amount of money. And we realized how many hours of studio time that would get us. And we're like, that's not quite enough time to really make a record. We don't want to be rushed. So what if we took that money and instead bought some equipment? And this is like the mid 90s. So equipment was expensive and not nearly as powerful as it is today. So we went that route. And that was a game changer for me in terms of, we bought a Korg 8-track machine. So it wasn't even a computer program, but you still had the faders and you could record a few different tracks and overlap them. And it was overwhelming to look at and to use. And the manual was just awfully written. It was written by like scientists, like literal engineers, like literal smart people, not musicians, not creatives. So it was hard. It was dense and it's hard to figure out. But once I figured out like, oh, I didn't know what multi-track recording was. I didn't know that you could record something and play it back and record yourself on top of it with like a vocal harmony or another guitar part to sort of see if it would work together. And my eyes were open to recording as a songwriting tool or an idea generation tool because I didn't need the band with me. I could kind of lay down all the parts to just even see if they worked before we brought the band in. And that was like a light bulb moment for me, which sent me down the path of I want to learn how to do this better. And so I went to audio school in college and learned audio engineering and music production. And that was just a lot of, I feel like I went to school, but I just played in the studio all day, which was really fun. And that led to me doing freelance recording and mixing after college. I worked in a big studio for a while and I realized it wasn't a good fit for me. I just didn't like the environment and the pressure. And it wasn't really about music as much as it was just about getting clients in and out, which I understand it was a business. So I did freelance recording, and then it just, one thing led to another during the, talk about hard economic times we're going through right now and in the future. It was the last recession, the Great Recession, and it was 2009 when I lost 2 jobs in 1 year, had moved to a new state, and needed to make money. And so I was trying to ramp up my freelance recording and mixing business and started putting out videos on the internet. And that kind of led to what's now the recording revolution, where I'm able to teach over 500,000 people every month on YouTube and other places how to be a musician that needs to learn how to record music and make it sound professional on a budget. And it's just been the craziest thing that turned into an actual business.
Right. Absolutely. So speaking of the recession, and you've mentioned this on your podcast already, kind of how we're currently, if not already in one, we're facing another one. But as evidenced by the development of the recording revolution, basically you took the reins and you really started pumping out content on a weekly basis and multiple times a week. And so seeing how that's worked out over the years, and then now you've continued to do that on your second channel, how would you say this could, or how could we take this as a learning experience for us content creators during times like these? And addition to pumping out content, how can we kind of connect to our audiences a little bit better? Maybe we're starting from scratch, or maybe we're just getting into this YouTube game or just content creation in general. Are there any tips you can provide for us to kind of stay motivated and kind of, just continue to add value to people?
Yeah, I think people don't quite understand just how much potential they have if they were consistently showing up online in a space helping a certain group of people. I think a lot of times people are waiting for permission to do something like what I started with the recording revolution. No one gave me permission, and I wasn't even willing to give myself permission because I didn't feel like an expert, right? I didn't feel like I was qualified to teach recording. Like that's what a professor would do, someone who's been in the music industry for 30 years, and then they want to get out of the rat race and they just settle down and they teach at a university. Like to me, that's what a teacher does. I was just still a 26-year-old who knew a lot about recording and made lots of records and did it professionally, but I didn't feel like I was an expert. So there's a disconnect between what you feel like you're capable or allowed to do, and then what you really have inside you in terms of value to offer. And I think what's fascinating is when the people even 10 years ago were starting to wake up to it. And now they're even starting to wake up to it even more. Like you can choose to show up online. Let's say it's a YouTube channel. Let's say it's in your Instagram account or your Facebook page. You can choose to show up online consistently and virtually raise your hand by saying, here's who I help and here's what I help them do. And you just kind of make that up.
Yeah.
Because the proof will be in the pudding. Like, there's a lot of people that discredit this type of online learning, or they're irritated that there's no red tape. So anybody can just start a channel and say, I'm an expert on something. But there's no reason to get upset about that because the proof's in the pudding. If an idiot gets on the internet and has no clue what he's talking about and starts a YouTube channel, people will figure that out pretty quickly.
Right.
Like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about.
Yeah.
It's a completely democratic situation where the fans and the audience get to decide who's good and who's not. So that cleanses and sort of washes out the bad, but the good will rise to the top. So you have to take the reins and say, hey, do I want to create some economic certainty for myself when in the midst of a lot of economic uncertainty? The way you do that is by building an audience. You may not know what you would sell to that audience or how you'd monetize. None of that matters right now, because the best monetization strategy, the best product matters little if you have no one to sell it to or no one who cares. So all that matters right now for someone watching this or listening to this is can you start to build an audience online around something that you know that you're good at, that you like doing? And can you build an audience by adding value? That could be entertainment, that could be education, that could be motivation. Those are three very different things, but they're all functionally doing the same thing, which is adding value, building like credibility with an audience. And it starts with 10 people, 20 people, 30 people. But that has power over time because you'll wake up one day and realize I got 1,000 people tuning into everything I do. Well, then that's all you need. Kevin Kelly from Wired Magazine popularized that 1,000 true fans concept over 10 years ago about you can make a full-time living if you have 1,000 true super fans who give you $100 a year for something, whether it's a subscription or a product, because that's $100,000 a year as a solo creator. So the possibilities are endless, I guess, if you start showing up online and building a little audience of your own.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's super helpful. I mean, and especially in today's climate, I can say this in like my own niche, kind of like orchestral composition and production. That we have forums all over the internet, and you see people starting these YouTube channels and trying to build a presence online, which is awesome. But then there are also some people who start paying for ads, and I actually see them pop up on Facebook. And so, and I know you have a kind of an opinion about paid ads in general. But what kind of crosses the line between putting out content and then paying for ads? Like, is there a time when it's kind of too soon to pay for ads? Should we focus on authentically building an audience first, or is it maybe always a good time to help our audience by to help kind of build our brand by exposing ourselves to more people through paid ads, maybe as a tool?
Yeah, I land on the topic of paid ads. I land on the side of what's the point.
Yeah.
And I know I've really good friends of mine who totally disagree with me, which is part of the brilliance of what we do online is like, there's no one way to do this, but I land on the point of what's the point of paid ads? When paid ads get eyeballs, yes, and they seem like a shortcut to get eyeballs faster. But there's two problems. There's a lot of problems. There's two major problems with paid ads. One is it costs money. So when you're starting out, generally you don't have any money. So it's hard and not really the best use of your money to throw it at ads at the beginning when you probably have a product that sucks. You probably have no clear idea how to serve people. So you're going to get eyeballs on your crap, which that's the worst time to run ads. The best time is when you have a real polished, proven product that right. converts, and then you just need some more people. So it costs money, which is hard when you're starting out, but it's also, you become a slave to that model where the only way to keep getting eyeballs is to keep paying Facebook or to keep paying YouTube or Google or wherever you want to pay for ads. Whereas if you create content, it is a slower process. Yes, it doesn't make you money right away, correct. But what you're doing is you're putting out all these sort of magnets or markers all over the internet that are permanent, that are evergreen, blog posts that will exist forever, videos that will exist forever, that YouTube and Google are crawling forever. You do the work once, and every time you do an article, it doesn't just disappear. It adds to your pile of like magnets that are drawing people in. So for example, I've got videos that I shot 6 years ago that every day send me leads. 6 years ago. And so the more content, if you spend time putting out content over time, you'll be unstoppable because people can't not find you in that niche.
Right.
You cannot go on YouTube and not find me if you type in anything related to home studios or recording. Yeah. And that's because of that's not because of any ads. I don't run any ads, especially not on YouTube. So it's because of the content. So I think your time is better spent by creating permanent lead generation by creating content, as opposed to like you have to keep feeding the lead generation with the ads. The moment you stop running ads, the lead generation goes down.
Right.
And then the second problem with ads is that it attracts a different type of prospect, right? So ads by nature interrupt an experience. So if I'm on Facebook, I'm just looking to have fun or looking for a stupid meme or just looking for news or fake news or whatever I'm looking for. And so an ad interrupts that experience. And at worst, it's like, oh, that's annoying because it literally interrupted me. At best, it's intriguing and you're willing to forego the interruption because it's funny or it's a curious ad, or if it's really well done, it'll get my attention in a positive way. But still, it's interrupting something. I wasn't looking for that brand. They came looking for me and they said, hey, look at me. Whereas if you go on YouTube and look up something about home recording or microphones or music and you find me, you're much more drawn to me because you were looking for someone like me. Whereas the ad has to convince you that I know you weren't looking for me, but here I am and I'm still worth your time. So I feel like the quality of lead you get from content is infinitely better than the quality of lead you get with the paid ads. So it's going to convert better. It's going to build my brand better. They're more likely to buy my stuff, even if it's down the road, because they were looking for me. So it's just a totally different type of lead and experience with that prospect if you're doing it through content.
Right. And I love the term lead magnet. I mean, I think you were the one who, like I first heard it from, and I was like, wow, that really makes sense. Because if you produce something that people really enjoy and can benefit from, then it, attracts them as a magnet does. It's just really attractive. So, seeing as many of our audience are musicians and producers in general, I get this question all the time, like what's kind of the most effective way to market our own music and put it out there in the world? Is it better to kind of put it on streaming services? Is it better to, like pay one of those services to put it on those sites? Or is it better to kind of put it on somewhere like SoundCloud or YouTube or, one of those sites where they can listen to the entirety of the song for free, but there's no barrier to entry in that case, and maybe it's better to show clients who actually want to get a taste of the entire piece. So what are your views on the best way to, or the most effective way to kind of promote our own music and get it out there in the world?
Yeah, I think two things. I think one, you have to really know what your goal is. Like, what are you trying to accomplish in your career? Is it that you want to get hired to do orchestral composition for people or to work on films or video games or music? Or are you trying to just be known as an artist? Like, it just depends on what your goal is to some degree. So I would get clear on what your goal is, but then two, understand that really the music industry has died and been reborn, right? There's still an insatiable desire for music, but what once was the commodity that people bought, which was your music, is no longer what people want to buy. People don't want to buy music like they used to, right? And I think that's really hard for true musicians, especially those of us that grew up in the 80s or 90s or early 2000s. Like, that was all we knew, was you made music and then you sold your music. And it was either CDs when I was growing up, or then it became, okay, digital downloads through iTunes Music Store, fine, but it's still selling your music. I don't think that's a model that makes sense moving forward for most musicians. There's a few superstars at the top that can still sell records, but that's going to eventually die out. So I think, unfortunately, that doesn't mean people don't value music. It's just what they value is almost, if you want to be an artist, they value the celebrity. So if I'm like a Taylor Swift, I would rather give away my music, put it up on YouTube, let it stream, and not worry about selling records, but I would want to use that to grow my audience. Like, I would want the biggest audience possible, so that I can sell merch, or I can sell live shows, or I can sell my subscription fan club where they get access to me, or I can do a perfume line. I mean, that's the musician, like Rihanna. I saw an article about Rihanna lately. She's one of the wealthiest, if not the wealthiest, female musicians right now in terms of net worth. But most of her money didn't come from selling music or even her contracts with the record labels. It's because she has a stake in Tidal Music, right? That Jay-Z and Beyonce started. So that she half owns or part owns that streaming service. And she has clothing lines or perfume lines. Like, her celebrity then can be monetized in different ways. Now, that might be an extreme example because not all of us are going to be that famous, but it's the same concept. Music is the open doors, the bridge to people to get to know you and like you, but you have so much more you could sell or offer or monetize with than just your music. So that's one way to think about it. If I'm trying to get a job, if I'm a composer and I want to do work on, like, I don't know if you're into Star Wars, but The Mandalorian that came out last fall, sure. Super dope show. And I love the score for The Mandalorian. And like, I don't know if, I forget the guy's name, Johan something.
Right.
I don't know how he got the gig, right? But it's like, it's not John Williams. It's not traditional Star Wars music. It's someone else. It feels younger. It feels fresh. But someone had to know this guy. And someone had to know that he's good. And I would want all my music out there so people could see how good I am, get a taste of me, like you said, get the full thing. Because if that gets me jobs, why would I want to like hide it behind a paywall? I'd want everyone to hear my music. I want it to spread. I want some random director to be like, dude, there's this guy on YouTube whose music is awesome. Like, I don't know if he does shows or movies, but we should contact him. Like that, I have grown so much more by putting so much out for free because it gets people to notice you. And I think that's the most important thing, is getting noticed. And if you're just hiding all your good stuff behind a paywall, it's hard to get noticed.
I love that. Yeah. And I mean, especially if we look at the top artists today, they release albums, but at the same time, they release all 12 tracks on YouTube as well, right? So there's like, what's the point of, hiding everything? It's, yeah. Cool. Let's dive into mixing for a second. So if for anyone who knows the Recording Revolution, I probably stumble across your videos on a vocal video or something like that. And as you've mentioned, it's kind of one of your most popular styles of video. But in general, you explain mixing in such like a simple way and easy to understand. So why do you think people get so hung up and so confused and mystified about the art of mixing? And generally, what does it really boil down to, the core concepts of mixing? What would you say?
Yeah, I think mixing, it's like when you start recording music and playing around with like the software, even like GarageBand or Logic or something, at first you see how simple it is. And you're like, oh, this is cool. I can record the different tracks or play the different parts.
Yeah.
And then I can change the volume of each part and balance it out. And at first you're like, this is simple. And like, that's actually very true. Like, that's actually a really good space to be in. But then you start to look up more videos and you start to try different things, or it's not quite sounding the way you want. And you realize, oh, there's all these different tools like compression and EQ and phase issues. And so then it becomes super complex and overwhelming. And then you start to play with all these effects, and it's easy to destroy the natural sound that your intuitive ears created probably a really good sound. Because if you're a musician, you intuitively know how to record music in the sense that you know what it should sound like. And so I think people get really overwhelmed and confused. So what I feel like my job is to take people back to that initial phase when it was fun and exciting and simple, and show them that mixing really is simple. And it's sort of like the Hippocratic oath, right, of doctors is first do no harm, right?
Right.
So the first thing with mixing is don't screw it up. Like, don't wreck all the hard work you did by, if you got a really good piano sound or you have really good samples and you play it and the piano really does sound beautiful, just don't ruin that beautiful sound.
Yeah.
If it needs to be slightly tweaked, that's fine, but don't go so hard that you just destroy all the goodness. So my job is to make people realize mixing is all about one word, and that's balance. It really, at the end of the day, is, can you present in a stereo file that people listen on their AirPods or whatever, can you present all the tracks, all the instruments, the whole arrangement in a way, in 2-channel stereo, MP3 or whatever, that sounds clear and balanced and I can hear everything. And then from there, it's a matter of, there's different tools that can help you get that balance, volume and EQ and compression, things like that. But if you always keep a simple question and a simple goal in the front of your mind, it helps you to ask good questions. Why am I using this compressor? What am I hoping it will do for my track? If I don't know, I probably shouldn't use it. There's no point in using a tool that you don't know how to use it. It's best to maybe get educated on it, or maybe you don't need to use it at all. But less is more. Simple is better than complex, and it's all about balance. And it's hard because people see their favorite mix engineer or read an article about a mix engineer that are all using all these wonderful tools, and they feel like, crap, if I want to be professional too, I should use the same tools. Mm-hmm. And they make this weird gap of like, okay, I'll do all the stuff I see them doing, but they don't understand why the engineer is using that tool, and they've got years of experience with that tool. So does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So after we have our initial balance where we kind of make sure all the tracks are heard and everything, the next question that usually comes up is, okay, so you talk about EQ, you talk about compression, and those are kind of the core two tools, but how kind of do they work? And, what are the kind of the core philosophies behind those two tools? And you actually have entire mixing series dedicated to those two topics on your channel, which is awesome. But for those who are more beginner, and I have quite a few people just getting into mixing on this channel, so maybe you could share a few insights into the differences between EQ and compression and how they kind of help to shape the mix in general.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, those are the two most powerful tools that you have as a mix engineer. So in a way, it's helpful to know that if I could just learn these two things, I'm going to be set. So EQ is probably your most powerful tool because that's going to shape all the frequencies and the tones, right? So if I have a piano and I'm like, I can't hear it very well with all the strings and everything else, the tendency is to want to turn it up. And that's the right first move, because it could just be that it's too quiet. But then if you turn it up and find that, okay, I hear it better, but now like there's these weird low frequencies, or it seems like too overbearing, or I turn it up and I still can't hear it, you realize that volume alone isn't the solution. So there might be, certain frequencies, low bassy frequencies or high, frequencies or mid frequencies that kind of have, there's different tones, right? And you know that as a musician, like in an instrument, even an orchestra is a good example of EQ. You've got instruments that hold the low frequencies, the bass and all those instruments that are down there. You got instruments that hold the high frequencies, the violas and violins. So, and it's the combination that gives you the full spectrum of sound. EQ allows you to do that on a specific instrument or track. So I can take the piano and say, I want to hear the clarity or the attack of the keys a little bit more, those upper frequencies, but I don't need too much more of the bass. It's nice and full already, or it's too full. So now I can turn up the volume of a specific frequency or turn down the volume of a specific frequency. So it's like zooming in on volume, but on another level. And it's that type of control that allows you to hear a full orchestra or a full band, and nothing is covering anything else up. You can notice everything clearly. And because every instrument, even the human voice, covers a wide spectrum of frequencies, and you don't need to hear every frequency in the human voice. You need to hear the parts that our brains hear as human voice. And so a lot of the low frequencies you want to eliminate, let's say, because they're covering up the bass guitar or the low end of the piano. But if you remove those frequencies, it still sounds like a human voice and you never notice it. So it's like creating room for everything to play. So that's what EQ does. And then compression is the second most helpful one. That is more mystifying to people than EQ, because I think people understand EQ in your car radio: more bass, less bass, more treble, less treble.
Yeah.
Compression almost takes volume to another level. It's like an automated volume knob. It can say, you know, the human voice, let's say, is super dynamic. It's quiet, it's loud. Even if you sing at the same volume, if I'm singing vowels, I'm going to naturally be louder than if I'm singing consonants, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and even certain vowels, like ah is louder than ooh, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so the human voice, if you look at the audio wave, is all over the place. There's no way for that to sound clear and upfront on top of a heavy metal, you know, song or a full pop song or even a country song, because it's going to disappear. It's going to ebb and flow. So a compressor can look at your audio and it can turn down the loud parts and turn up the quiet parts and create a more consistent volume automatically for you, so that the human voice sounds like it's right there the whole time on top of the whole band. Or if it's a piano solo on top of a whole orchestra, you know, where physically back in the day you would move a vocalist to the front of the stage, or you move a pianist to the front of the stage and the orchestra would be behind him.
Yeah.
You know, a compressor can do that for you inside of an MP3. It can make sure that the prominent things are always prominent. And that also your music isn't like, I'm having to turn it up and then turn it down and turn it up. It's all going to be consistent and still sound musical. So I think the problem with compression is that the knobs on those things and the names for the different parameters are not very helpful or intuitive.
Right.
So I don't know who invented it. Probably, again, some engineer in a lab coat. It's probably some guy that wasn't a musician.
Scientist.
Scientist. And I God bless them, but they ruined everything about audio engineering for us. So that's probably part of the problem.
Yeah, no, I get that. So yeah, balancing, EQ, compression, it's all very important. And let's say they've done those things, and generally they've got those parameters working for them and it sounds great, but there's still a few, you know, things poking up here and there. And you know, it's still not every instrument is sounding completely at the right volume all the time. And so this is when you would start using something like automation, drawing in that data to make sure everything is polished. And so how much of that do you usually see yourself doing after applying EQ and compression and just to smooth everything out? Is it a very necessary process, do you find? Do you do it a lot in music in general when you mix?
Yeah, I think it's pretty necessary. I don't do it on every track, but generally the lead vocal, if I have vocal-centric music, I'm going to go through and do volume automation just to make sure every little teeny K at the end of a word is heard, and so that the intelligibility of the lyric is there. A lot of times, like drum fills, I'll turn those up to bring your attention to that. Or I'll go through systematically from the beginning of the song to the end of the song and try to listen like a listener. And if there's a part that, like, automation is almost like a director sitting in the editing room after they filmed a TV show or a movie, and they're like, our job is now to draw the viewer's attention to something we really want them to see, an important piece of foreshadowing, an important expression on someone's face when there's no dialogue, but it carries a lot of weight. And they might have filmed it all and they know it's all there, but if they don't zoom in or cut to that scene or have these scenes next to each other, the viewer might lose the importance of what just happened. Right. And so I feel like automation does that for us in a musical sense. Like you could say, I recorded all the parts and I know they're there, but does the listener know they're there? And the drum fill might be there, and if you pay attention to it, you might know it's there, but they don't know it's coming. So your job is to draw their attention for that moment. Oh, here's the drum fill. Here's that little piano lick. Here's the organ came in, and I don't need to hear the organ like at the top of my mind the whole time. But the moment it comes in, I really need to notice that, oh, there's that beautiful Leslie cabinet sound. Like your job through automation is to draw attention periodically to the things that you want to draw attention to. And it can even just be just for a moment, because then once you notice it's there, your brain hears it. And so it's a little just auditory trick to just bump the volume for a moment. And that's what I use automation for. In some songs, you don't need to do a ton of it. In some songs, you're like, dude, that bass fill, it's getting lost. So let's just bring that up there and so on.
Perfect. Yeah, one final question here. So when we're talking about mixing in general, you know, as we said, there's so many people starting to get into it and they want to make their own recordings sound good. So when people ask you a question like, what's one tip you can give me to help me maybe listen better or just, know my tools better? What's one thing that can help me improve my mixes like today? What's one really practical thing you can say that will just help us in the overall view and approach maybe when we start mixing in general?
Yeah, can I give you 3?
Please. The more the merrier.
2 of them are super related, right? One is just turn your speakers down or your headphones down. Mix at lower volumes. I think we inherently want to hear everything nice and loud because if we're proud of our music, we want to feel it. And I listen to music loud just as a listener because it's fun. My wife can't stand how loud I'll turn up something in the car or my headphones. But it's the opposite of what you want to do when you're mixing because you want to be critical. You want to be objective. And it's so hard to be objective when you're mixing, especially your own music. So what's funny is there's a natural thing that happens when you turn up music. There's something called the Fletcher-Munson curve. And your brain, when the music gets louder, creates a bass lift and a high frequency lift through your ears. So you perceive more low end and more high end. It basically makes music sound more exciting than it actually is. Music is literally the same, whether its volume is higher or lower, but it does something with our brains. And so if you turn up your music and you're mixing it loud, you might fool yourself into thinking that there's plenty of low end and nice, exciting top end, and your mix might seem exciting when it's really not. So what happens a lot of times is mixes from amateurs are really dull. And like, I'll listen to a mix and review it for a student. And I'm like, it sounds really small and flat. And they're like, dude, it sounded awesome to me. They probably were mixing it at a loud volume and it sounded great in their room and exciting. Right. But that's not how it sounds in real life. So turn your speakers down. Your mix will not sound nearly as exciting, which is good. Then it's your job to make it exciting through the right volume, the right EQ, things like that. So lower volumes. And then 2, mix in mono. And what I mean by that is we hear everything in stereo or in our headphones or speakers. But one of the oldest tricks in the book that has really served me well is to collapse your mix to mono temporarily. So you can do this by putting a stereo widening plug-in on your master fader and instead of making it wider, bring the width to 0 and it'll collapse it to 0. So everything sounds like it's coming up the middle or out of the speakers. Or if you have a panning knobs on your master fader, you can pan them both up the middle. Or if you have an audio interface that has a mono button like I do, you can just collapse it to mono there. But while you're making your important EQ and compression decisions, listen to your mix with all the tracks on top of each other in mono, the way music used to be heard. And what that will do is, 1, it'll frustrate the heck out of you because you won't be able to hear everything very well. Yeah. But that's good because, again, that reveals, if you can't hear everything well in mono, that reveals that your EQ is not good, your compression's not good. Right. You can make a really good sounding mix in mono. Because the only difference between mono and stereo is that you can create some separation through panning. But it's the same EQ response, it's the same level and volume. So I like to collapse my mix to mono and then go, crap, I can't really hear that guitar part. So I either need to turn it up or find an EQ curve that allows me to notice that guitar part. And then I do it for the vocals. I do it for everything until the mix is sounding really clear in mono. And then when you pop it back to stereo, it's only going to be better. That's like the icing on the cake. But the reason we do this is, A, it makes us make a better mix, but because in reality, unless you're listening in headphones or your listeners are listening in headphones, or unless they're sitting perfectly in between 2 speakers, they're never going to hear your mix in complete stereo. In your car, they're always to one side of this car anyway, so you're only hearing mostly from one speaker. If your music is famous enough to be played in a restaurant or in a mall, it's coming out of a mono speaker. They're all just mono speakers around the mall or the restaurant, right? And so it has to sound good in mono. If you have stereo speakers in your kitchen or something, by the time it comes to your ears on the other side of the room, it's collapsed to mono. So the point is, it has to sound good in mono anyway. So that really, it trips people up. But when you get good at or practice mixing in mono, then it really makes you make a better mixing decision. And then the final thing I would say is use professional mixes to reference. So don't mix blind. A lot of times we just pull up our tracks and we mix them to sound good to us, but we still haven't compared it in real time in your chair, out of your speakers, in your room, to a professional song. So if you're mixing something that's very orchestral in nature, you probably have some orchestral music that you laud as like the greatest sounding, not only music, but like recording quality.
Yeah.
Why don't you import that into your software and flip back and forth between your version of the song and the professional?
Yeah.
They'll be different, but like that'll teach you a ton about what a professional mix should sound like in your room, on your speakers. And that is the greatest educator you could ever have. And it's depressing, again, super depressing, because you think your music sounds good and you flip over, like, crap, it sounds awful. But I'd rather know that now than export it and send it to my friends or a professional and say, here's my latest thing. But then they're like, dude, this sounds awful. I'd rather know it's awful now, right? So it protects you from that, and it teaches you a lot about, I think I know what that music sounds like, because I've listened to that record 100,000 times. But in the actual reality of it, I don't actually know how loud those violins are. I don't actually know what the piano actually sounds like. Our memory is really bad. Our tonal memory is really bad. So it's a great tool to educate you and help you make better mixing decisions.
Yeah. I mean, for those of you watching, if that wasn't helpful enough, just know that I have clients hiring me now to mix their stuff, and it's solely because of Graham and other like similar channels who breaks concepts like these down in very simple ways for us to understand. So thank you again, Graham, for being on with me, and I hope my audience, I know they would definitely appreciate the stuff that you've been talking about. So thank you again.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, awesome. So I'll see you all in the next video. Have a wonderful day, and take care. Bye-bye.